A man is driving his car when he hears a knock at his window. Startled, he rolls down his window just enough to see a little girl standing there holding a lollipop. She tells him that she needs to get to the other side of the road because she doesn't want her mother to see her eating candy. The man is kind enough to help her out and decides to drive around the block with her in his passenger seat. That was until he heard something that made him slam on the brakes. The police had been looking for this girl for days. This child had gone missing after walking home from school. And even though they were certain she would be found soon, they were worried that she might have been taken against her will by a stranger. After all, it was the end of the day, and people were probably just eager to get home. She had been walking home from school on Tuesday afternoon when she was approached by a stranger while crossing the street. So without hesitation, she opened the door and jumped into the car. The man immediately sped away from the scene, leaving the people around them wondering what had just happened. They discovered that the car was registered to a local businessman named Richard Mason. Meanwhile, Richard was doing his best to hide any evidence of the crime. He had wiped down the interior of his car and gotten rid of the lollipop wrapper so there would be no trace of the girl inside. Even though Officer Davis knew that Richard was breaking the law, he decided to let it go. After all, it was the end of the day and traffic was already bad enough. Officer Davis couldn't help but wonder if the car belonged to one of the residents, but he dismissed the thought and continued on his way. Just then, he heard a loud bang and slammed on his brakes. He had forgotten that there was a stop sign at the end of the block, and he almost ran right through it. As he turned toward the intersection, he saw a little girl standing on the corner. She was holding a lollipop in her hand and looking down at the ground. At first, he thought that she must have dropped her candy and was too ashamed to pick it up. But then he realized that she was wearing the same clothes as the missing girl and she had a lollipop in her mouth, just like the one the kidnapper had given her. Without thinking twice, he rolled down his window and yelled, "Hey, kiddo, what's your name?" She looked up at him with wide eyes and whispered, "I'm Sarah." Officer Davis was stunned. Not only was this the same name as the missing girl, but she also matched her description perfectly. He quickly got out of his car and walked over to her, asking if she was lost or needed any help. She shook her head and tried to walk away, but he stopped her by placing a hand on her shoulder. He turned her around and asked again, "Are you lost? Do you need some help?" She looked back at him with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I'm okay. I'm just waiting for my mommy." Her voice was small and timid, which broke Officer Davis's heart. He knew that this little girl had been through something traumatic, and he was determined to protect her. He asked her if she could remember where she lived and if he could take her home. She nodded her head and pointed down the street. He thanked her and gently led her to his cruiser. As he buckled her in, he noticed that she still had the lollipop in her hand and it wasn't unwrapped. This meant that she had been carrying it around since the incident, which was heartbreaking. He knew that she must have been scared and alone for the past 3 days, and he felt terrible for not finding her sooner. As they drove down the street, Sarah told Officer Davis where she lived. He listened patiently and tried to make conversation to keep her spirits up. He asked her about school and if she had any pets, and she answered each question with a smile. He could tell that she was trying to be brave, but he could also see that she was scared. When they arrived at her house, he knocked on the door and introduced himself. A woman opened the door and gasped when she saw a police officer standing on her doorstep with her daughter in hand. She quickly apologized for not answering the door sooner, but Officer Davis assured her that it was fine. He explained what had happened and why he was there. The woman was shocked and immediately began to cry. She hugged Sarah tightly and thanked Officer Davis for bringing her home. He watched as they embraced and felt a sense of relief knowing that Sarah was finally safe. As he turned to leave, he heard the woman ask, "How did you find her? Where were you?" Sarah looked up at her mother and whispered, "I was in a car with a nice man. He gave me a lollipop and brought me here." The woman's face turned pale and she looked back at Officer Davis with wide eyes. "What did you say?" she asked. He repeated what Sarah had said, and the woman's face crumpled. She thanked him again and closed the door. As he walked back to his cruiser, he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Something about the woman's reaction didn't sit right with him. He knew that Sarah had been kidnapped and taken to this house, but he couldn't understand why her mother didn't seem concerned. He got into his car and started the engine. Just then, he heard a loud crash from inside the house. He looked up and saw the woman standing at the window, frantically waving for him to come inside. He quickly put the car in park and ran toward the house. As he burst through the door, he saw Sarah lying on the ground with a cut on her forehead. Her mother was kneeling beside her, trying to apply pressure to the wound. He rushed over and helped her up, asking what had happened. She looked at him with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt her." She wouldn't stop talking about the man who gave her a lollipop and brought her home. "I just wanted her to be quiet." Officer Davis was shocked. He had suspected that something was wrong, but he hadn't imagined that Sarah's mother was the one who had done this. He quickly called for backup and paramedics. As they arrived, he arrested Sarah's mother and took her away. He also made sure that Sarah received medical attention for her injuries. She was taken to the hospital where she was treated and released into the custody of Child Services. In the days that followed, Officer Davis couldn't help but think about Sarah and her mother. He wondered why the woman had taken such drastic measures to cover up her daughter's kidnapping. Was she involved in illegal activities? Was she trying to protect her daughter from a dangerous world? Or was she just a desperate mother who didn't know how to cope with her child's behavior? He knew that the truth would eventually come out, but he never expected what he heard next. During the investigation, it was discovered that Sarah's mother had been struggling financially and emotionally. She had recently lost her job and was worried about how she would support her family. On top of that, she was exhausted from taking care of Sarah, and her behavior was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. When she heard about the incident with the lollipop and the red convertible, she panicked. She knew that Sarah had been approached by a stranger, and she was afraid that something terrible had happened. Instead of reaching out to the police, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She lured Sarah back to the house with the promise of a reward and then locked her in the basement. She thought that she was protecting her daughter from a dangerous world, but in reality, she was only making things worse. When Officer Davis heard this, he couldn't help but shake his head. He understood the woman's desperation, but he couldn't condone her actions. He knew that she had meant well, but her intentions didn't make her behavior any less harmful. He also realized that Sarah was in danger, and he was grateful that he had found her when he did. If he had waited any longer, who knows what her mother would have done to protect her. In the end, the woman was charged with unlawful imprisonment and child endangerment. She was sentenced to probation and therapy, while Sarah was placed in the custody of her father. As for Officer Davis, he was hailed as a hero for his quick thinking and bravery. He had saved a young girl's life and brought her home to her family. He didn't do it for the recognition, though. He had simply followed his gut and done what he felt was right. From that day forward, Officer Davis always remembered the case of the missing girl in the red convertible. It was a reminder that even the smallest actions can have a big impact, and that sometimes the most ordinary days can turn into the most extraordinary adventures.